It's time for another edition of Saturday with Seniors right here on KC 101. A big thank you to our sponsor, Hemingway General Contractor. Hemingway General Contractor can sell and install a 95% efficient Luxair furnace that'll lower your gas bills. Plus, Luxair is the best warranty around. 10 years on both parts and labor. And Hemingway's includes this incredible warranty with your furnace package for free. For more information, call or text 662-6997. Now our guest today, we've got Harold House joining us here on Saturday with Seniors. We're between Blossburg and Marsh Run here in the House. How are you?
Doing good.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on here. Your family has quite a history of logging, and I've been asking you for months to try to set this up, and we were finally able to align things and make it happen. So I want to hear I've never really learned the history of logging, and I want to know some of the stuff that you heard from your parents or maybe your grandparents, maybe things that you didn't see directly, and then what you saw in your early days of logging and your life here in Tioga County too. So how far back does logging go in your family?
Well, I was born on December the 15th, 1934 in Forksville, Pennsylvania. My dad was working in the sawmills at that time, so that's how far I go back.
And Forksville is?
It's Sullivan County.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in Sullivan County over there, who was working? Your dad was working there when you were born?
Yes. Well, he and my mother, the ladies cooked for the men, and my mom got $2 a day, and my dad was the head sawyer and was a foreman over about 10 men. He got $3 a day. So at $5 a day, they were making pretty good money at that time.
The dollar was such a different thing back then than it is now.
Yes.
And
sure
people
was.
certainly respected the money. So $5 a day is what the family lived off of when you were born.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
Was your dad's dad a logger too?
Yes. It's funny, on our family, my mother's side, my grandfather there was a sawmill man. And my grandpa House, which is down in the Morris area here, he worked in the sawmills, but the thing that he was more noted for was riding the logs down the river into Williamsport in the springtime when they would cut them loose and let them go down.
We've all heard about these log drives, but
Yes.
we've seen pictures, but really people, I don't think, grasp the idea of exactly what a true log drive was and the crazy intensity of sending what was probably much bigger trees than we see now floating down a river.
Yeah. But there also was trees the size of ours. But yes, they had a lot bigger timber in those days.
I mean, they were clearing out Pine Creek side to side back then, and we wouldn't have our beautiful Pine Creek, really, actually, if it wasn't for it being logged and then coming back to what we have now, was donated to the state. So in between, it was a little rough, but...
Yeah.
So he worked the log drives, you're saying?
Yeah, that's what he did. Yes. He had a little farm, and he would do his chores and stuff, and then have to meet there at daylight in the morning, and they would ride down to Williamsport, and then they would bring them back up.
How long ago did the log drives end? When you were a little kid, were they still going on? I was thinking into the 50s they were running, but...
I think like late 40s is about when they actually quit, that I know of.
So you actually remember seeing the logs coming down?
Oh, yes.
Describe that. What was that scene like? Did it happen all in an hour? Was it a whole day? Was it days, or were they just random?
It was all day, and there were many men that went on a ride. It wasn't just one or two men. On the river, they also had a boat with a kitchen and everything in it, and they would ride all day, and then at night, they would hook up and stop it, and then men would get fed, and the women were in the building.
So it was a real woods camp. We're talking Pine Creek here?
Yes.
Or wow.
All winter long, they would pile the logs up along the river. Then come the floods in the spring. They would
wait till the water was high enough,
and they'd cut them loose and ride to Williamsport. Yes, but it took a lot of men because the logs don't always stay in the river. They go to shore, so you have to go there and get them back in the water.
Keep them floating and keep them moving and not getting stuck. And then did you experience the Williamsport end of things ever? That's pretty much the logs were coming out with the booms on that end, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't your end.
I really was never there. I was young, 3, 4, 5 years old.
Yeah.
To change subject a little bit, my dad worked as the head sawyer in a sawmill, and Mom cooked in the lumber camps, like I said before. And then after I was probably 4 years old, we moved to Dewshore and put a sawmill up there. Ed Lee owned the company, and when I was about 5, I think.
So what year did you say you were born? Just so I can put this in place.
1934.
Okay, so we're talking somewhere in the late 1930s, building a sawmill. What would have powered a sawmill then? Would that have been a water-powered sawmill or steam or?
Steam. Dad worked for the Lee family. They had a number of mills. He worked on 2 of them. So he knew all about the steam engines, and he had a chance to buy one, so he did. And then he didn't buy a sawmill. The sawmill burnt down where he was working. And they just pushed the carriage and everything outside and bought new and went on. So my dad fixed the old ones all up in a couple of years of working on them. He had a sawmill. And
wow. And that's where the business started at that point in the late 1930s. Went from being an employee to actually having a company.
Yeah, we moved over here in Marsh Run in 1943. And Dad was cutting timber for the tipple, the mines, that all the coal would go into the trains. And that's why they got him here, to saw the heavy stuff, maybe 8x8s or 8x10s, 25, 30 feet long. And a lot of sawmills couldn't do that.
That is huge board. Did that arrive by rail, or how did you ship that by truck? Something like that? You're talking.
Yeah, we
I don't know what that weighs, but
we were just up the road here about a mile with the sawmill, so it was only 2 miles from where they were going to use them, and. To be truthful with you, I don't know.
No sharp bends in the road, I guess. You would have made it around with that.
Yeah. I remember seeing them cut them, you know. And,
wow.
Had to have more men with stuff that size. I do remember, I thought maybe the question would come up as how much they had to pay in those days for...
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear how much they have to pay. You know better questions than I do, so fire them.
We got a lot of young guys that worked in the mines and then didn't like it and got out, and high school graduates that were looking for jobs. Dad hired quite a few of them, and they were paid 98 cents an hour.
Was that more than the mines were paying back then?
In the mines, it was all production. And with us, it was all hour rate. I would say it was probably about the same thing.
Sure. Did you have friends that worked in the mines? Did you know a lot of people that worked in the mines back
I knew them, but I never been in the mines. Other than we used to take what they call cap pieces and put on top when they were sturdying up the ground, you know. They'd put wedges in there and pound them in. I was only in maybe a couple 100 feet, and then we'd put them along the tracks, and they'd pick them up.
So when you first came to town, though, you was pretty much, if you weren't a miner or a logger, I guess Ward was around then, but that was probably 90% of the work, I'm guessing, or maybe I'm wrong on that.
Even before my time, though, they had a motorcycle place where they made motorcycles here.
They made motorcycles in Blossburg?
Yes.
I just learned something new. I knew there was a bowling alley here before the fire and all, but I didn't know they made motorcycles ever here.
There was a tannery in Blossburg at one time. That was before my time, but there were a lot of industries over the years.
Yeah.
You know, but in my time, the foundry was the main one. And, of course, the coal, you know. But then after the coal got to the point where they couldn't dig it no more because it wasn't deep enough, then they had the drag lines. Then they went down through, take all the trees off and go down and get the coal.
And were you involved with removing those trees, or did they just have their own equipment to take those trees out of there?
They had their own, but later on in life, as I got older, I had chippers and everything, and I took the trees down for them. And they would take the stumps out.
Yeah. So you came to Morris Run in the early 40s. Were you working for your dad at that point, or what were you doing for work?
Well, I went to high school in
I'm mixing up my years a little bit here. So you were still in high school then, okay.
Yeah.
Although the kids were working in high school then, unlike now, a lot of kids had part-time jobs, summer jobs.
You can't hire nobody. I don't want to work. Yes, I always worked Saturdays for my dad, and a lot of times nights. And every time that we moved our sawmill, we take the sawmill to the woods because we didn't have trucks to haul them. I'm talking about way back.
Okay.
And then,
so nowadays you cut down the trees, you bring them to the sawmill, and they get milled.
Yes.
And then the boards go out. Back then, it was kind of like if I wanted my lawn mowed at my house, I wouldn't bring my lawn to the lawn mowing company. They would come to me to do the cutting. Was that common back then?
Yeah, for small sawmills like us. We were not at that time any kind of a big sawmill. saw about 4,000 or 5,000 board feet a day. That was small. A lot of these mills today are sawing 35, 40,000 feet a day.
Yeah, well, just like farming, I imagine back then you could have 30 cow make a living, and not anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So when you sawed the logs, did they keep the logs to sell themselves? Were they often using the logs that you cut on their property right there, or did you
we'd buy the timber, and then we would saw
and take it?
We would sell the lumber for furniture factories.
So more often hardwood than stuff was your forte.
Yes, but we did saw a lot of softwood because up in Fallbrook there were a lot of hunting camps, and they would buy hemlock and pine and build new buildings or garages or whatever. So we did saw both hardwood and softwood.
Very interesting. Tell me about your memories when you were at Blossburg when you were a kid. You said there was a motorcycle manufacturer here, and it was a whole different place. But what are some of the things that you remember specifically or enjoyed going to? Was there any restaurants or entertainment or what you did for fun? Or
there were restaurants. There was one on what they called the Brick Road at that time. It's over the cement bridge in Bloss.
The island side of the bridge you're talking?
Yeah.
Okay. South
and you
Williams.
go over the bridge and just go a little ways. There was a restaurant there, gas stations.
All that near the entrance to Island Park.
Yes.
You remember the trains, I bet, coming into town?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Obviously.
I remember the day the train hit a car and killed 2 people.
Oh.
I remember that day. I was in school. Naturally, the kids all got out of school and went up to see it, to see what happened.
You say naturally. Nowadays, they wouldn't say to the kids, hey, we got a car just get by a train. Let's all field trip.
That's right.
Where did that happen? Which end of town? Was
it was right
down by the fire department end of town, the other end?
No, this end, where the cement bridge is. The train came across the trestle and crossed the road right there. And as they were crossing the road, that's when they got hit.
Wow. Do you remember the plane when it came down in Blossburg?
Oh, yes. My father and I was out by the first sawmill that we had, and I was unloading logs, and Dad was there, and I happened to look up, and I seen a plane turning real sharp, like he wanted to go back to Elmira. And just a few seconds after that, the tail fell off and came down.
You saw that, yeah. The Mohawk flight.
I knew it was close. We were logging up there for J&B Mining, and it came down close to that. So I was there quite early.
Anything you want to talk about with that? I know it was quite a tragic event for people that witnessed that.
I'll just give it a little thing. After this was all cleared up and everything, we went in there and cut that area. We found dimes and nickels and all kinds of dollar bills, and that still, they come floating down out of the trees after that. But the strangest thing that I found was a cigarette lighter that was embedded in the tree. You could see it, and the lid was open on it.
Yeah.
And when we cut that out, we played around with it a little bit, it lit. And so I thought, man, that is something what I should have done. To
survive all that.
Yeah, I should have found out what make it was and give it to them.
Yeah.
For advertisement.
Sure. Fell from the sky and survived.
Yeah.
I know when the plane crashed, they had to build an emergency road in with logging equipment and stuff. But it was the mining company. I can't remember who did that. But I read the story on how fast they built that road to get people in there to rescue people.
They were putting the road in there within a couple hours after the thing hit the ground. And because they were stripping coal just up
Big
north.
Equipment happened to be nearby, so they were able to get to it.
Yeah. That was... There's a lot of things I've seen that I didn't want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've heard different stories from people, and it was a really tough...
Yes.
They reconstructed as much of that as they could in Blossburg, the plane, trying to figure out...
In Marsh Run.
Was it Marsh Run that they were...
Yeah, it was my uncle's building in a Eugene house. That was an old silk mill up there, and he owned that building, and he bought it. And so they brought that plane there and put up wires, and they would hang whatever they found there until it was finished. That was about the end of it for me.
Yeah, I understand that. The big fire that Blossburg has, now that we have a plaza, I don't know what year that was. I don't know if that was before or after your time.
64 to 68, somewhere in there.
Blossburg's had a few tragedies in its area over the time, and that fire really changed the whole lay of downtown. There was an opposite side of Main Street that a lot of people don't realize.
It's a shame because the town, I always thought, looked pretty nice the way it was, and then they had to tear a lot of it down because it didn't burn completely down. So that's where all the stores are. That's where it burned.
And then the plaza eventually came back in after. Is that where the bowling alley was, too? I heard there was a bowling alley.
Well, the bowling alley didn't really burn down, but they tore it down afterwards. That was about the end of where there used to be a street one in there.
So what was Blossburg and Marsh Run like on a Saturday night back then? Was it a party town with all the miners going out, or did everybody have sort of rotating shifts so there really wasn't a one night to...
Well, of course,
was the Wild West, I guess I would say. I almost pictured Blossburg 1940s with all the miners, you know, and stuff, it being that kind of Wild West saloon.
They had a jail here, and they kept them in there. I mean, there was people in the jail quite often. And Saturday night was the big night in Blossburg. One thing they used to do many years ago, and I have not found anybody that remembers, down by the old bank, they cut off about a couple 100 feet and shut it down. And they would get sawdust from my dad, and they'd spread sawdust, and then they'd have a dance there. And that was a big thing at the time. There was some food there, and, of course, beer.
Yeah.
And everything.
It was, kind of like a barn dance without the barn, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. One of the other things I remember a lot about was the flood, 72.
Yes, I've seen pictures. Well, every town along the river, if you had a river through your town in 1972, you had a different town after.
Well, the river, as far as I'm concerned, was ruined by the flood because they brought in the big dozers and just cleaned it out. So what happens then, the water doesn't stay in the swamps. It's just like a funnel. It sucks all the water out, and now we don't have near the water in the creeks that we used to.
Sends it downstream faster, which can cause flooding downstream. We've learned from our mistakes in a few things.
Yes. We used to have nice swimming holes in the river.
Yep.
Now you can't find any place deep enough to swim.
Before the days of the pool in Blossburg always had some nice little swim holes where people would go and enjoy.
Yes.
So when you were 10 or 11 years old in Fallbrook, tell me about what you were doing then.
Well, I was driving a team of horses on weekends and whenever I wasn't in school, and we were skidding the logs right to the sawmill. I remember we had a team of horses at that time. And we had
Which is probably more dangerous than a diesel skidder, I would imagine. A little less predictable and hooking and hitching. And so here you are, a kid, 10, 11, whatever years old.
Well, because you were walking right along beside the logs, and if they would hit something, they'd swing over and hit you in the legs. And a lot of guys had broken legs and that type of stuff. But we had a portable barn that when we moved somewhere like that, we put this barn up. You would just set up the sides and put a bolt or something in it to hold them and put the manger and everything in, and they would stay right there. The horses never left until we were ready to go somewhere else,
Oh, all right. How long would you typically be at a job? Weeks, months, a whole summer?
I think we were up there about maybe 8 months, 7, 8 months.
So you'd have temporary shelter set up. You'd set that up, move it, put it somewhere else on the next job. And how about housing? Did you go home to the same house every night?
Yeah, we did then because my dad had just bought a new house right here where we are now. And so Dad didn't have a pickup truck or anything at that time even. So he bought an old Dodge car, took the back end of it off, and built a rack in there to haul hay and grain and everything to the horses.
Jeez.
There's some of the things I can remember.
That's some really neat stuff.
Halfway up the Marsh Run Road, there's a little bit of a clearing on the right-hand side before you get to what we call Lawsons Mine Road, just after the upper gas line. And that's one of the places where when they first came over and were working to do the tipples, that's one of the places they moved their house and everything. They lived right there on the Marsh Run Road. I can remember Dad telling stories about waking up in the morning to the skiff of snow in the room.
Well, that particular house...
So you actually, when you were really young, lived in a portable house, though, too, besides bringing the barn with you here.
There weren't much houses to them. Most of them were like 14 by 16.
Yeah.
The table would be on the wall on hinges, so when you weren't eating or anything, you'd leave it down to give you more room in the house. And it was one room.
This is a camper house.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Tiny house, yeah.
Mom and Dad's bed would be off in a corner somewhere, and my bed would be hanging from the ceiling with hay wire. So I slept over top of them.
Wow. How often would your family go into town to get supplies? Did you go in once a week?
Every Saturday night they would go somewhere and buy groceries.
Mm-hmm. And where was that somewhere usually more often?
Back then we were in Dewshore, so we'd get our groceries and then
so week's worth of supplies and
then Dad would say, we don't have to go home right away, so we would sit there and watch traffic and people on the sidewalks. Dad would go in and buy a 10-cent ice cream cone for he and my mother and myself. Mm-hmm. So that was our entertainment for the week on Saturday night.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Marsh Run had a baseball team. Everybody used to go up on Saturdays and Sundays and watch other towns that came in, Canton, Troy, and that was a big thing.
Some major league ball players actually come from area. One from Arnett.
Some of them did play pros.
Yeah, first guy to ever hit a home run in a World Series was Jimmy Sebring from Liberty, and a guy from Arnett was had the most home runs in the season, if I'm right, back in the 30s. So it was baseball was big around here. Where did they play in Morris Run? Where was the field? Is anything still recognizable there at all?
The field is still there, but when you get up on Main Street, there'll be a road turns off left, just goes a few hundred yards, but that's where the field was.
Yeah, and a typical game would be hundreds of people that would come out to...
Yeah, it would get quite a few there. And we had a guy in Marsh Run, and I think he's still living, but he loved to act for the team and tell everything that was going on, And that was always fun to listen to that. And watching the guys that you knew and they would hit home runs, it was always fun. I enjoyed that.
So how did that disappear? Did one year they decide they weren't going to play, or did it just slowly fade away over time? Do you remember?
I think it just faded away because all the good ball players, when Blossburg had theirs, the good ball players all worked in the foundry, and then they went in the military, and when they came back out, they played again, you know. And it was a big thing. And then along come the softball here in town, and we have 4 or 5 teams there. A lot of people don't know that when I was in the Kiwanis Club, we were talking about we wanted to do something for exercise for people. So they thought it would be nice if we made a softball field, and I built that.
Is that the current fields that are down there?
Yeah,
now?
Well, now the kids are using them, but at that time it was just for guys and
for the adults to get some exercise and get out and
basically yes, that was it. That was a lot of fun.
Was the Polish Mound still there? I don't know if you heard about that pile of dirt near the pool that was there before the pool. I don't know if you heard the story on this. It was during World War II. They sent a bunch of soil from Poland over to Blossburg to be stacked near the pool. Mountain Home had done an article about it. I'll have to send you a copy of it. I have an old copy of it, but it's a neat story. And when they built the pool, that got pushed down, and Island Park was in disrepair during World War II. And then the floods kind of did some damage to it and everything all together.
Yeah, and high winds blew down all the nice big trees there at one time.
Yep.
I just happened to be there, and my machinery happened to be here, so they wanted to get the trees and logs out of there. So we went down with all our men and our machinery, and we took them out. I think it was just one day is all we worked. They were on the ground. We just had to cut them out.
Clear them all out,
and haul them away.
Sure.
And we sold them to a sawmill because we didn't want to do that much pine at one time.
Yeah, I got you. I'll tell you what, can you stay? We're going to talk again some more next week. This has been part 1 of Saturday with Seniors. Harold House joining us, born in December of 1934 and lived at many locations, but much of his life in the Blossburg Morris Run area. And we'll talk with you some more next week if that sounds okay.
Yes.
You've been listening to Saturday with Seniors here on KC 101. If you know someone who would be a good guest on our show, have them contact us here at the station at 662-9000. And a big thank you to Hemingway General Contractor. They sell and install Luxair furnaces. They'll lower your gas bill. So when it's time for a new furnace, call Alan or Brian at Hemingway's and ask about their Luxair furnaces and the financing options that are available. You can reach them at 662